we've got Marc Guggenheim, who's, among other things, is Arrow.
Woo!
Of course, Eva Carter wrapped up last week. Thank you for coming here, and of course, you are been married for 10 years now, or how long?
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
And you know, you met while you were both working on different Law and Order franchises.
Yes.
Right?
I was working on Law and Order SVU, and Mark was across the hall working on Law.
Did at the time, you know, did the new comic book love come out, you know, in early conversations, or what, you know?
Well, Mark has been a long time comic book fan. I actually got really exposed to comic books through Mark.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of laid the groundwork for, Agent.
Yes,
Carter.
I'm responsible.
Yeah.
I'm responsible. It's all thanks to me.
So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
We're all lucky for that. So, okay, this last week, as a fan of both shows, was big for me as a viewer. Because Arrow had I don't want to spoil it necessarily if people haven't DVR'd it yet, but a big oh my god moment. And of course, Agent Carter signed off for this season. So, what is that like at home when you've got these big episodes coming? What's kind of the atmosphere? You got your own shows.
Well, tell them about what you did for the finale.
Well, we're a very tight-knit group on Agent Carter, and we actually live tweet together. A good chunk of the cast, whoever's available, when Haley was still in the country, she would join us, and we would all literally watch a DVD and live tweet, even on the East Coast. Well, I had everybody over to the house on the final day, but I needed Mark's help to kind of set it all up, and Mark's a little bit behind on Agent Carter.
Guilty.
So he's queuing it up for me, and he's watching.
I've been told I don't get any, there's children in the audience, I don't get any quality time with Tara, if you know what I mean, until I catch up.
So the trailer for 7 is airing, and he, not get on spoilers, but literally there's a big explosion, and he was like, "Oh my god!" So it was,
So you get spoiled.
yeah.
How, talking about live tweeting and stuff, both shows, very active on social media. Politically, how does it make sense? I mean, would it be inappropriate if you were to live tweet Arrow or you were to live tweet Agent Carter?
I constantly post stuff.
So it's okay.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Nobody-
I'm not going to let anybody stop me from tweeting. I mean, from a work perspective, I wasn't on Twitter really until Agent Carter, and I wanted to support the show. So obviously I'm doing it for work, but I'm not getting paid for it. I feel like this is something I do on my own time to support the show, and I will support Arrow or whatever show I want to.
Yeah. So, have there been any complications as far as the Marvel DC House Divided thing?
I'll say, the only time, it's actually, and this has sort of had nothing to do with Tara, but in terms of the Marvel DC things getting a little uncomfortable, is a year ago, like over a year ago, during the writing of episode 203 of Arrow, I wrote this sort of evergreen Daredevil story set during Daredevil's early days. And, I have you to thank. And then Marvel basically put it on the schedule. We were looking for an artist and put it on the schedule for the Wednesday that all the Daredevil episodes drop on Netflix. So Hollywood Reporter publishes an article announcing the story saying, Arrow producer to write Daredevil tie-in comic. Thank you very much. But that one was not ours.
Whoops. So, okay, so you guys have obviously, there's a lot of anticipation about these big moments in both of your shows. How far, for example, how far in advance did you know Oliver was going to have a big showdown with Ra's al Ghul?
Oh, since the beginning of the year. Oh wait,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Oh yeah, Tara. Oh, I'm sorry.
I actually, what's funny is I knew about it ahead of time only because you were so in love with the actual footage that you're like, come look. And I mean, and that's the thing, is we will spoil the shows for each other in
Yeah.
the sense that there's something we're really excited about, and you just want to share it,
Yeah.
you know?
But you're very good about not spoiling Agent Carter. Like literally, I only caught like that piece of episode 7, and you didn't tell me that was coming. So you're pretty. The ending, again, try not to spoil it for you guys, but like the coda of episode 108 of your season finale, you had told me about back when you were trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, really cool. So it's like a mix.
Yeah, yeah. And what about, you know, you've got 2 daughters, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So what is their relationship to these shows? I mean, I don't really know. I would have loved Arrow as a young age. I don't know if it's kid friendly or how's that gonna work?
They are very aware of Arrow. Of course, they like the Black Mary. They don't watch it on a regular basis because it's probably a little too adult
Oh, it's too.
for them.
It's definitely too adult for them. That said, we're not very good parents, so we've shown
Yeah.
they've seen it, but they just haven't gotten to it.
Yeah, I mean, Agent Carter's a little bit more their speed,
Mm-hmm.
and so they.
So what's that movie?
Oh, my eldest has gone back and watched the pilot again, and she wanted me to get her a full outfit, and so we have a hat, and we have, you know, I haven't had it tailored yet, but I got a little 40 suit, and she's very excited about Comic-Con to be able to come out. I need a little more time. I actually want one of them to come as Dottie.
Yeah,
And Sarah.
No, Lily with the strawberry blonde hair.
Yeah, but Sarah with killer instinct.
Is there anything that, you know, for your own sanity or your relationship that you can't talk about at home, you know, when you're working on these 2 projects?
Well, it's funny. I think sometimes like I'll come home, and this is like even before we were working on our respective shows. I'll come home and Tara's like, "Hey, think about the story problem we were working on today." But she's much better about that than I am. I'm like, "Do we really have to talk about that?" But no, I don't think there's any conflict.
Did you know, you worked on a comic book together before. Is there any? Do you have any plans? Anything in the works to re-team?
I had a lot of fun doing the comic book because I'd never done anything like that before, and I had kind of thrown out this idea to Mark, and he really caught into it and kind of really took it and expanded it. You know, I think it's much better for us to be supportive of each other. I think that there's like a good part of us both being in the same industry is that we understand the time constraints. We understand getting notes. We understand sort of like all the pitfalls and can be supportive. The hard thing is you literally have somebody doing the same thing. And so it's like right now is really great because I'm kind of off. So I'm able to pick up a lot more of the slack on the family stuff. But when we're both at that heightened place, it's really hard to juggle everything. And so, but you understand it, and so you do your best you can.
It's nice to, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
It's very nice, I will say this, it is nice to come home if something's happened at work and I can talk about, or Tara can talk about what happened in her work, and we really can just totally speak in shorthand because we know the way the business works, we know a lot of the same people. You know, she's at ABC where I was, you know, for 6 years, she's at Marvel where I've been for like 10 years. So like, you know, we don't have to, the stories can be a lot shorter and we can get to the advice, either the advice part or the crying on the shoulder part a lot sooner.
This is for both of you. You know, Agent Carter, of course, 8 episodes, and Arrow much more. Are you jealous of the other one's setup? You know, where maybe you would want more,
No,
or you would want fewer? Yeah.
I know. Actually, I would love 13.
Yeah.
I would love a slightly expanded season, but I would love to cap it at 13 just because of the visual effect work that we do, which most people, actually, if you get a chance, Wired did this little piece, this digital piece, which kind of breaks down the first 2 episodes and some of the visual effects that Island did. And it's pretty amazing, and my visual effects supervisor actually just gave me the entire series and every visual effects shot and did a before and after. And we have so much stuff in the show that people don't realize are visual effects. And it was just really, we average 200 an episode. And so to make it, we do a lot of map paintings, and it really, 13, I think we would be pushing the envelope of just keeping the quality up. So that's one reason why I like the shorter season for the show.
And hopefully we all want a season 2. And I know that you and Haley have talked about other decades and stuff.
Yes.
I mean, are you even thinking about that? Or are you thinking we'll do the X-Men First Class thing, it'll be the 50s for the next one maybe? Or is it too early to say?
It's funny, we've talked about many different things where potentially keeping it in the same period, but maybe doing something where the case would take her to 40s Hollywood or Europe, or something that we can still, we also have the time frame of kind of when S.H.I.E.L.D. started that we have to kind of stay within, I think, right now, because otherwise you have 2 agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. basically on the air, just in different decades.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, the constraints we're working with right now.
We are very spoiled that we get all these TV shows that are superheroes and awesome, and we may even get another Flash Arrow spinoff. Hopefully, we'll see. I know you can't say much, but yeah. Good news came out that it was in the works anyway. And is there, what's, and of course Supergirl too is coming out. So is there a critical mass? Is there any worry that, oh, okay, we're gonna have too many episodes of superhero TV, or is it just let's get these while we can, while people are willing to put out the money for it?
I don't know. I kind of feel like if they're good stories, people who are drawn to it will watch it. There was a time period when, everything was a cop show.
Yeah.
And the good ones people tuned into.
I think, it wouldn't be network television if there wasn't a drive to kill the golden goose. So, I think like Tara said, it's comic book shows with a new procedural, and the water will find its proper level eventually. But right now, the number of quality comic book shows is incredible. The number of shows that are actually good is incredibly high. So that's really the thing. I'm totally with Tara. It's all about the quality. People are not going to get oversaturated by badness.
Yeah.
They don't get oversaturated by good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And having worked on movies as well versus TV, what are kind of some of the challenges for maybe Green Lantern film versus making Arrow over a series of years and stuff?
Well, I think that with Green Lantern we really learned the lesson of control. We didn't have it on Green Lantern, and it sort of got taken out of our hands after a certain point, and stuff happened. I always say, like, the difference between features and television is, in television you're, as a writer, you're writing for your life. You're literally like every 8 business days, there's a new script due, and if you're the showrunner, it's all going through your pen, and you are just writing, and it's like, sometimes literally what's getting shot is your first draft. At the same time, it's getting shot. With features, you really get a chance to think about every line of dialogue and revise and rewrite and really grow roses. At the same time, it may never see the light of day because so many movies get written and don't get made. So that's the push and pull between features and television.
Also, there's a character versus plot.
Right.
And the fact is, not that you can't have a lot of character that happens in a feature, but the fact of the matter is, you have maybe 2.5 hours, and there's a certain amount of plots that has to happen. It's funny because on Agent Carter, we worked with both Marvel Television and Marvel Film, and this was the first project the Marvel Studios was really involved in for television, because Peggy, they feel very strongly about. And I think it was really interesting to watch because we had to pitch all 8 episodes before we even shot anything. And as they saw the scripts come out, I think it was really interesting for them to see the character development that was happening, because what you soon realize is in the Marvel Universe, Peggy and Coulson will now have almost had more screen time than a lot of their bigger heroes because of these 8, like, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. and because of 8 episodes of Carter, all of a sudden she becomes, you know more about her. You spend 8 hours with her that, you know, some of the other characters you have not. So it's interesting, and, you know, if she gets a second season, that will keep expanding. You will learn more about her and her universal power and Jarvis, and it's kind of fun. You can only do that in television.
Speaking of, you know, Howard and Jarvis, you know, it kind of reminds me of characters like Felicity, maybe, that are just super popular on Twitter. You know, these guys who are breakout stars, and it seems like I always see tweets about them. I'm sure you do too. So does that affect the writing at all when you see people going nuts for this stuff?
Well, I can speak for me, is that, like, for Jarvis and Howard, they're so much fun for us. That's, I mean, I think it's sort of a give and take thing where we have so much fun writing those characters, and therefore I hope the audience is responding to it. I mean, they're just, it's like, the weird thing is Jarvis is a flip of Felicity in a weird way. Is he's a support character who
It's a little comic relief.
yeah, and, you know, but at the same time, Peggy or Stephen Oliver couldn't do their job without that support.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of chemistry. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, even though he's married.
Yeah.
You know, this speaks to me, this topic of the husband who's attracted to the, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I don't swear things. Yeah, I think you know, you speak about writing a character who's sort of big on Twitter. It always starts with us loving the characters first, because we're working so far in advance on Twitter, even though we're active on Twitter and we love to get that response to Twitter. It's a little bit of a disconnect, because, you know, I think you had pretty much come very close to writing all the episodes of Agent Carter before you premiered.
Oh, yes.
You know.
Before we premiered, we were shooting, we had to write the finale.
Yeah, so you're sort of writing these characters in a vacuum before you get to discover what the Twitterverse thinks of them.
We just know what we like.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, the final scene with Jarvis and Peggy together was very touching. So that was before you knew that would be a big thing, that these two would be really popular.
We knew that their chemistry was
Knew it worked.
incredible.
Yeah.
And so that was a really important scene. It was, I think, you know, my writing partner, I mean, I agree with her, it was probably one of our favorite things we've ever written, because it was all about restraint. And here are these two people, and if you notice when you watch the scene, they start off, they're walking completely around the room, and until they get to the conversations they really are meant to have, and they just barely touch. And when he hands her, I don't know how much to spoil, and he hands her the vial, and it's in that moment, it's actually weirdly very British. And it's very much about these two very British characters. Like, you could almost, to me, like, see a scene like that in Downton, where there are two people not talking about what they should be talking about, and only having this one really moment of closeness at the end. And we were really proud of how that was shot and how they acted. It was one of those things where you're like, so often you write something that has to live in your head, and this was better than what I had in my head.
Yeah, it was pretty stunning to watch. You know, it shows that, you know, both of your shows are kind of about the idea of family, because these guys are all family, even if they're not related. So does that, does that come from, you know, you guys have a strong family, of course, so does that inspire that, or where does that come from, that idea in your shows?
You know, I think in the case of Arrow, I think, you know, Greg Berlanti and I and Andrew Kreisberg, we're very comfortable with family dramas as a milieu, as a medium, as a subgenre, if you will. So I think it was our initial instinct to just gravitate towards, creating a found family for Oliver, because in the comic books he really doesn't have any sort of supporting cast, or, you know, all of his family members are dead in the comic book. His mother, his father, he had no siblings. So we added all those elements and added the found family elements. But I think, like, I know just for myself, we, Arrow traffics a lot in tragedy and fathers and daughters. I mean, like, the upcoming episodes, there's a lot, I don't think I'm spoiling anything, hopefully, when I say, like, there's a lot of Laurel Lance stuff going on, and Nissa and her father, Roz, they've got a lot of conflict. And I've got conflict with my daughters, but I do think a lot about being the father to a daughter when I'm writing these father-daughter storylines. So they have hopefully they feel lived in and come from a real place, even though I'm not a police captain or the head of an international assassin.
I also think that, I mean, when you work in Hollywood, you start collecting people in your lives. Like, I mean, about found family. I mean, I have a writing partner who I've been working with for 17 years. We have writers on our staff that I've known for over 12. That you do start to kind of collect these people in your life that make your experience so much better. And like that was the thing as Agent Carter for me was the height of that. Like, I love everybody I work with on my show, and we all have so much fun. And it was funny because, like, I had everybody over to the house, like I said, for the final viewing, and we were really actually working. We were all tweeting the entire show, and we were all outside tweeting, watching the thing, and you can look into Mark's office, and Mark's got his earphones on, and he's typing away, working.
I wasn't being antisocial.
No, but it was
I had
really funny,
something to do.
because one of our writers, Jose Molina, was sitting there taking a picture of Mark and tweeting it.
Full disclosure, I wasn't working on Arrow, I was working on the spinoff.
Very interesting. Any,
That's all I can say.
no,
Actually, it's funny, I'm more afraid about talking about the spinoff mainly because I don't want to reveal the title by accident.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh no. But it's fun. It's exciting. Yeah, Tara.
I want to open it up to the audience in just a moment, but Mark, I want to ask you a quick question. I want to be careful because I don't want to anger you. But
Yeah, don't anger me.
But okay, so I'll try to explain it best. For context, in an interview, I think it was with one of my bosses at the Hollywood Reporter, he just off the cuff kind of said it'd be cool if Batman, if I could have any fantasy character, it would be Batman, and then kind of out of context, that became a headline on other sites saying Marc Guggenheim won.
Yeah, that's the thing you always have to be careful about, because everything you say, it doesn't get carried on like Hollywood Reporter, but all the secondary, tertiary sites, it's like, yeah, of course, I'm like, this is news. Yeah, and that's the thing, I didn't think it would be a news story, it's just like, yeah, of course I want Batman on Arrow. I mean, duh, like, fire me if I didn't.
Right, so, kind of to set the record, it would be really tough or potentially impractical, right? Or,
yes, it would. Yeah, I mean, basically, we have a great relationship with DC. We sort of navigate with DC which characters in the toy box we have access to. Obviously, Gotham has Batman covered. So, we're not going to be touching any Batman characters. At the same time, DC is, they've really been great, and they recognize that Green Arrow does not exactly have a fantastic rogues gallery. He's got Count Vertigo, and we've used him twice. So they know that we need access to other characters, but it's a, it's a give and take. But certainly you're not going to see Batman on Arrow before you see Batman on Gotham.
Yeah.
And I think they've got like 20 more years to go. Get there. So, so no, but if wishes were horses,
And just so you, Tara, have the chance to set the internet on fire, is there what's your dream Marvel character on Agent Carter that you haven't had yet?
It's so hard because we're in this weird time frame that there's not as many characters. Synthetic Man would work in our world. Problem is, like, Submariner would work, but the fact is, I believe he is all tied up in his legal rights. For us, it's about finding a way. Like, obviously, Dr. Faustus really wasn't of our time frame, but it was something within conversations with Marvel Studios, it was something they were willing to kind of go, oh, well, it's still Captain America centric, and we could move it back, and we could play with it. It still actually ties into the Winter Soldier program, and you know, I think the thing that hopefully, if we did our job properly, like when you do see Cap 3 or other things in the Marvel Universe, that just some of the character stuff is going to be laid out a little bit more with Howard and Peggy and these character Jarvis who live on in other ways in the storylines now.
And how much of Cap 3 do you know about?
Actually, you know what? They are really good. Like, it's funny, sometimes the guys will come into the room and go, can you do X? And you're like, okay. And like, just walk out. And like, or there'll be storylines that we were actually pitching out, and as Steve McFeely says, that's rubbing our rhubarb, so you can't use that. And like, so like, we knew we were on general areas on things without being told what the storyline was. And I actually kind of like that because I'm a fan and I would like to watch the movie and know everything. So like, I'm like super excited to see Avengers, and I don't know any more than anybody else does.
Well, let's open it up to you guys if you have some questions.
Hi, for Mark.
Mark 1, Tara 0. I'm not keeping track.
Okay, our question, when they casted Thea, did you always have the intention of making her Malcolm's daughter?
Honestly, no. So much of the show was planned out in advance. At the same time, we've always allowed ourselves to be surprised. And actually, I think the first person who suggested it might be possible was John Barrow, his husband. And he'd be watching the show with John going like, Thea's your daughter. John repeated it to us, and we started thinking about it, and we're like, oh my gosh, there's like a lot of great story to be had there. So, that was one of the, that's one of the discoveries, one of the surprises. Obviously, we don't do that if, we don't do that if it's going to involve a retcon, but it didn't actually. So I'm really, really glad it gave us a lot of great episodes.
One guess, Brave and Bold is the new series?
That is not the title.
That's right.
Yes, you did.
I have a question for both of you, but my familiarity is kind of more with Arrow, just because I'm familiar with the DC universe a lot more. I don't really read much Marvel, but you hear often when you're working with licensed franchises, how controlling they are, how you can't, do certain things with characters and go various things. But in Arrow in particular, because I know that universe, it seems like you guys have a lot of liberty there. A lot of things that were never in Arrow canon before. I mean, you've created all new things. And do you think part of that is related at all to the fact that DC is working very closely on those projects, and Warner Brothers, CW owns those properties? Did they sort of plan where these things would go in advance with you? Are they going to adapt some of this now into the comic book world? What are the impacts from the one side to the other and back?
Well, I think first of all, I think Marvel is as closely involved with Agent Carter as DC is involved with. Sure. In fact, even now with all the mergers and everything, the corporate synergy is pretty much identical in the two companies. I think it's, with respect to Arrow, it's probably more a function of the fact that, Green Arrow may be well known as a character, but the canon's not that well known. In the sense that, the canon's pretty thin. You got billionaire, playboy, marooned on an island, comes back, basically fights crime as Robin Hood. No supporting characters really to speak of. An origin story that's been reinterpreted so many times that the canon has sort of gotten a little mushy and a little watered down, which is sort of where we get to come in and do our own thing. Whereas, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, the more, quite frankly, A-list characters, you have a lot less leeway. If you're doing Spider-Man, Uncle Ben's got to die. When we said, okay, you know what, Moira's alive, no one cared, even though Moira's dead in the comics. So it's a different, part of it's that. Trying to think, in terms of, we basically, we sort of have periodic check-ins with DC where we give them sort of big 30,000 feet pitches on, okay, this is what the next, we always begin with, this is what the year's going to be. And then, as we go through the year, we're like, okay, let us give you the next 5 episodes with a little bit more refinement. And it's been great, to answer the last part of your question, the comic books have slowly started to reflect, they introduced Felicity in the comics, they've introduced Diggle in the comic books. The tone of Arrow, I think, has gotten reflected. So it's become like a synergistic, symbiotic kind of relationship.
This one's for Mark. I'm so happy with how Arrow pretty much has kind of reset the precedence of how comic book shows have been done. It's fantastic. Because before that, the only thing I really held high was the original Flash show in the 90s. Because
I held that high too.
yeah, Smallville for what it was towards the end kind of got a little loopy. When I saw that the fact that you guys were like, okay, costume, Deathstroke, everything off the bat, I was like, sweet, you guys ain't pulling any punches. But that as the show progressed, the beauty is you're pulling in, as you mentioned, some more of these more obscure characters and kind of make them badass. Is there a list of right now of what you guys can use and cannot use? I know you mentioned DC, Batman pretty much, but like your working race, and I noticed that you're pulling, as you said, Arrow's very thin lines. You're pulling a bit from Batman, and that's fine. It makes it awesome. But is there anything else you're kind of Frankensteining into the show lately?
We in addition to sort of our periodic plot story meetings with DC, probably twice a year, we'll sit down with DC and we'll say, okay, and it's sort of like, they have a list of characters they'd like us to use, and we have a list of characters that we'd like to use, and there's actually a fair amount of overlap, or more overlap than you might expect. At the same time, I think they know what characters in the canon work best on Arrow, and we know what characters in the canon are probably more available. I don't walk in and say, hey, I want to use Lex Luthor. I know Lex Luthor's not available. But, other characters who I'll give you an example, actually. Tatsu Yamashiro, who, comic book fans know as Katana. That was a character that DC had said, hey, that character's available, and if you want to use her, that'd be great. And we're like, oh, that's perfect. She works so well with everything we've got planned this year. Ray Palmer was originally supposed to be Ted Kord. We wanted a character like Brandon's character, someone smart, someone tech-based. Our original inclination was Ted Kord, and DC's like, no, we've got plans for that character. They said, what about Ray Palmer? We're like, great. So sometimes it's a little bit of horse trading or just discussions back and forth.
Have you guys ever thought of using onomatopoeia? I know he's kind of a new
We have.
character. You have?
Ever since season 1, we've talked about it. I think what always stops us is we picture the studio notes call. No, we totally talked about it, and I'd be stunned if Arrow finished its run and we never got around to onomatopoeia. But at the same time, we just haven't found the right episode. And part of that is the approach we take. We always start with the episode and the characters first, and then we sort of figure out a villain that works. We just haven't had the right mix of story and villain yet.
And I'm sorry, just kind of one more thing. Can you add anything to what's going on with Vixen right now?
Oh, actually, we're going to start voice recording the actors, which is really exciting. The character design work it's phenomenal. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Vixen looks great, but we've also, Flash and Arrow are going to be in it, and hopefully it will feel like in the same vein as Flash and Arrow, just in animated form.
Are you guys going to keep the tone of the shows with the animated show, or is it going to be aimed towards kids?
No, it's going to be the same tone. It's probably more similar to the tone of Flash than it is the tone of Arrow in terms of its darkness. But no, it's totally designed for people of all ages.
Awesome.
The way the two shows are.
That's a dying art form right now. So
I completely agree. No, we're definitely not making it just for kids.
Thank you.
Me?
Yeah, Roy.
I actually have a question for Tara. So in an episode, Dum Dum Dugan refers to Peggy as Union Jack. Is there, or kind of calls her that, any possibility of her embodying that role in some capacity?
I don't know at this point, I'll be honest with you. we're still waiting for our season 2 pickup. But anything's possible at this point. I mean, the fact is, we have the ability to. I mean, I know that's a character that I believe still fits in that time frame that could be used. And I'm hoping in a season 2 that we would expand our universe into some more characters from the Marvel universe.
Is that something
you,
that...
you know who Union Jack is, and you also know the time frame and everything.
Okay, I have 2 questions. They're both separate. This is for you, Mark. I know you mentioned about the Suicide Squad. Did you ever mention about Harley Quinn? That's one question.
Don't ever mention her? Well, you know.
Or I mean, at least bring her to the show.
Well,
I know it's a Batman character.
The closest we could come was our wink and a nod last year.
That was
with
it?
Harley. That was the closest, and especially now with Margot Robbie playing her in the Suicide Squad movie,
Yeah.
she's doubly unavailable to us.
Oh.
But we'll always have that deleted scene on the DVD and appearance in 216.
Okay, and then I have one more, and this is for both of you. I know you guys are both writing for 2 different shows. Have you guys ever fantasized bringing the 2 universes together and how they would actually interact with each other? And then, like, you know, if you did, like, who would be, like, your main villain, or, like, who would you be fighting against, or, like...
I'm a total sucker for the intercompany crossover. You know, like, I grew up with Amazing Spider-Man versus Superman and whatnot. You know, and it's funny, since the Hollywood Reporter article we did, Leslie Goldberg asked us that question, or it came up somehow, and you know, we talked about it, and you know, we cogitated. I think probably the most realistic thing is if, like, she sticks an Easter egg in Agent Carter, and I stick an Easter egg in Arrow, and it gets through the whole system.
We've done it on other TV
Yes, we have.
shows. When I was doing Reaper, which was about the devil and these idiots, Mark was writing Eli Stone, which was about a guy who thinks God's talking to him. And Mark had written in it an episode where one of the clients was someone who works at the workbench, which was where my characters all worked. So we always liked that it was just this weird way that both the that means in that universe, both the devil and God are real.
And we actually got her props department to send my art department the logo for the workbench so that her actual apron, her workbench apron, was identical to the one that they used on Reaper. So
what's even weirder now is that art department, I think.
Yes, now their art department is working for Arrow. Comes full circle.
Yeah.
What do you think draws, I know there's been a lot of, now you alluded to it, you know, fan enthusiasm, like coupling like Felicity and Oliver. What do you think draws the fans to root for that relationship so much? And then the second part of my question is, how do you map out the progression of that relationship, not knowing how many seasons you have to go and not knowing like actors' contracts and things like that? So, 2-part question.
You know, it's funny, I don't think we anticipated the level of passion for a lot of the relationships on the show. You know, certainly Oliver and Felicity is the one that comes up the most, and we were a little surprised. We were, you know, I think it's fantastic, and I don't know what fuels it. I'm just glad that there is that kind of passion. Yeah, it is chemistry. I mean, we didn't have a plan, except there was so much chemistry between Steven and Emily. Though I also say, like, I defy you to put Emily in a scene with anyone else and have her not have chemistry with someone. You know, but it's a cool, fun thing. In terms of mapping it out, I would say the relationships on the show are probably the least mapped out part of the show. We really sort of pride ourselves on thinking in advance, and you know, I always call it like planting flags, you know, stuff that will pay off, you know, 2-3 years down the road. The relationships are something we do a lot less planning on, quite frankly, and we sort of feel our way through it and feel what feels right for the characters in the moment. And I think that's what makes it so fluid and unpredictable, because it's probably the least predictable part of the show for us.
Back in the game.
Are you ever going to do any more episodes with the Suicide Squad?
Yeah, actually, we've got a Suicide Squad episode coming up. That'll be episode 317, which is, you just saw, hopefully you just saw episode 15. So it's going to be in 2 more episodes. And it's called Suicidal Tendencies.
Will you be using flashbacks with like the person who leads the Suicide Squad and also the all the fun?
You know, because you're so adorable, I'm going to give you an exclusive. Don't tell anyone in this room, okay? The flashbacks are from Deadshot's perspective. Wow.
Could you talk about writing her character?
You know, we were really lucky. The writers, Marc Guggenheim, who wrote Peggy Carter and the first Avenger, had kind of started this character, and they also wrote the pilot, and we were able to really expand on her, I feel like, and show many facets of her, because I do think it's important that she is strong, but never loses her femininity at the same time, you know, and she gets in fights and she can kick people's ass, but at the same time, you know, the fact that one of the most powerful scenes for me was in episode 4 when she confronts Howard about the Blitzkrieg button and the fact that it had Steve's blood, and sort of the idea that she felt so betrayed by somebody who she really needed to believe in. And I feel like, you know, those moments make her feel real and make her feel like she's someone who's flawed and sometimes gets herself in a situation she needs help and is probably a little bit too, she doesn't like Asperger's, you know, so I mean, like, there's things about her that's just, we wanted to make her as grounded as possible. And I think that was our thing with Agent Carter in general, was we really wanted the show to be grounded because we were going to have some fantastic elements, and kind of having that kind of feel like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It was really important to us to explore how everyone came back from the war, all of those kind of layered into each of the characters.
My favorite character.
Oh, thank you.
Question for Mark. For the Arrow backplate, the Arrow changed in the season. Can you share with us the story behind why?
Well, we actually changed it every season. In season, the change between seasons 1 and season 2 was a bit more subtle, but if you look, they are different. So we just decided, Andrew Kreisberg and I decided back in the beginning of season 2, you know what would be really fun? So many things on Arrow really start with that. Like, we just go, you know what would be really fun? Let's change the Arrowhead every year. And then for this year, we knew it would be about Roz and the League of Assassins. So it struck us as just obvious to change it to reflect the nature of, you know, of the season. It's clearly a very sort of Middle Eastern, Arabic kind of arrowhead. It's got, you know, Sanskrit on, you know, writing on it. You know, and next year we'll change it. But this year we played around a bit because, like, for the Cupid episode, we replaced it with Cupid. Really quick inside baseball thing. When the company that created the original Arrow title card, they split up and, you know, went their separate ways, and we had to recreate it from scratch for season 2. But once we did that, we were like, oh, now we can swap the arrowhead anytime we want. But it took, like, everyone sort of had to, like, you know, remodel everything. But it's become, you know, a fun thing for us to play with here and there.
So what's
I think this question is going to be for me.
Such a big fan. No, working in a show that takes place in a very different time era, what are the struggles when it comes to writing, when it comes to phrasing and stuff like that? What are the biggest challenges you've had?
Well, we actually, for writing, we were trying very specifically not to sound too period. But at the same time, anytime we would use like a turn of phrase, we were actually being very specific to make sure that it did actually happen in the time period. So that was one thing we were always trying to be very careful of. It was also very difficult to be writing so many British characters from the time period, because I've never written for actually a British character before, and neither had Michelle, and she's the first one to say, she's like, that was another challenge of like trying to make sure that we were saying, not making a character sound too stereotype, you know, Jarvis especially, of a British butler. We've seen those in many different forms, and we took a lot of care, and actually James Darcy has been very kind in saying that, you know, he felt that he couldn't believe that we didn't have anyone British on staff, and that we were writing the British characters from the 1940s better than he's ever had. So that was really incredibly positive. And then on the production side of it, it was incredibly difficult in that and expensive, that every extra has to be wardrobed, hair and makeup. Anytime we're outside, we're doing set extensions, we're doing matte painting, and to make sure that we try to encompass the world.
So working on something that's an adaptation, how long did it take for you to feel comfortable with the world and feel like the characters were your own, and what kind of prep did you do for that? Did you just lock yourself in a room with like everything ever materialized?
You know, I went back and actually watched a bunch of my favorite 40s films, just because to kind of have some of the patter of dialogue, and for the look. And then I also went back and read all of James Ellroy's LA Quartet, because of just sort of that time period, kind of cop lingo, and as much as we're not a cop show, I just really liked hearing it in my head. So it's kind of the research, I mean, and then some comic book stuff of Ed Brubaker, just sort of kind of the Captain America world, because there's not that much written about Peggy in the comics.
You know, for Arrow, you know, Greg, Andrew, and I were such big comic book fans, we didn't really have to do that big deep a dive into the source material. But for Arrow, the challenge for us was, Greg, Andrew, and I, we traffic in these sort of very witty, bantery, you know, like ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, everyone's talking fast and very erudite characters, and we sat down to write the pilot for Arrow, and Oliver doesn't talk. So we really had to invent a whole new voice for ourselves as writers to write, you know, the show Arrow. In fact, Felicity came about mainly because it was episode 3. You know, we're like dealing with, you know, getting production started up and the show started up, and Andrew and I think we're both just really, really tired. And we both, you know, we were writing separate scenes in that episode, but both with Felicity, and we had I think the same instinct, which is, let's just write a character who is in our voice, who we can write. And that was like just a breath of fresh air. It was supposed to be just this one episode character to, you know, make our lives a little bit easier. But the biggest challenge in adapting Arrow was adapting our own voices as writers.
Look, I really like the way you incorporated the radio show into the show, and how it just shows the opposite of what she really is like.
Yes.
How much was that like a conscious decision to?
Oh, it was something that, it wasn't part of our original pitch, and we were working on episode 2, and someone had pitched, and one of the writers had pitched in the room, and we all just gravitated to it. And it was funny, it was a kind of process where originally it was only supposed to be at the beginning and then like in 2 other places. And Joe Russo, who directed that episode, had the idea of like, well, what if we wrote it in and cut in between the fight sequence and the radio show and sound effects. And we all loved the idea so much that we wrote it in, but the funny thing was when he delivered the cut, he took it out. And he thought, he was like afraid it went too far. And I was surprised not to see it, and so I asked the editor, and I said, did you think it worked? And he goes, I feel it's fantastic. And so we looked at it like, no, this is definitely going in. And I just felt it was the fun. And kind of that sort of, that's one reason why we brought it back in the final episode, was just sort of the fun of it. And we've even talked about whether or not making it a podcast.
Make it a podcast.
And actually, I don't know if anyone here listens to K-Rock, but Ralph Garman, who is a regular on K-Rock, was the announcer. And so,
What do you mean by podcast? You admit you write new
yeah,
teleplays?
like little 15-minute type of like storylines of Captain America, and, you know, Betty Carver.
So what do we need to do to make that happen?
Well, it's one of those, it's like that weird kind of thing where, like, you talk to them and they're like, that's interesting. And even Ben Blacker had an idea of something similar, and so like we kind of like, I think a second season would really help.
Make it happen.
So if we get a second season, what are the odds that we would be to get to see characters such as Mrs. Jarvis?
There's been such a clamoring for Mrs. Jarvis.
And also maybe perhaps Maria Stark down the line?
Well, like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in the room who knows more about Marvel than I do in some ways. When Maria came into his life, I think was in the...
He was more reformed.
Yeah, I want to say it was later, but it would be always interesting to have something kind of...
It was, I think Maria came into his life when he looked more like John Slattery.
When he turns into John Slattery.
Right.
But also maybe like Peggy's family, Peggy's parents.
That is actually something we've talked heavily about, is that actually learning a lot more of why is Peggy the way she is. Why does she have such a drive? Why is, you know, and how does a Brit end up working for the Americans? And sort of, that's all stuff we've talked about of wanting to really explore in a second season and kind of learning more about her family.
Another fan question, I guess, for Agent Carter. Without naming any names, could you tell us if we've at least seen her future husband?
You want to know what? It's really hard because possibly. We've talked about many different scenarios, and so that's over. I can't really answer that. I'm sorry.
Do you know who the husband is?
There's different people have different. You know what it is? I've always sometimes you just keep something to yourself, and everybody has their own opinion in the room, and will the best ideal woman. But I think the amazing thing about Haley Atwell is she has chemistry with everybody, and I think she has a really lovely chemistry, obviously with Jarvis, who's married. But I personally started off as an assistant at the X-Files. And so when you see those first 5 years of that show, those are two people who had amazing chemistry together before anything ever happened. And you just go, there's something lovely about that for me where it's there, but it's not kind of unsaid. But then I think she has lovely chemistry in the last episode with Suzette. And I think that even Jack Thompson, he's someone who's troubled and is interesting, and can she break that down?
I'm not sure from that.
Last question, right here.
I got a question and a comment. I'm one of the 2015 Disney writers, and I used Arrow as one of my specs. So I want to thank you for creating such an amazing show for me to use.
Are you on the TV or the film side?
I'm in the drama.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking of having coffee with you next week.
March 12th. And also, I had a question about the city transitions. I know this is always Boston, and Arrow, and I was just wondering, is it because of Cato and Andrew's Boston background, or?
Actually, I'm the one with the Boston background. It's not actually. I'll tell you straight up. Here's the deal. First of all, we sort of created Starling City to be, sort of an analog of Seattle. In a nod, which also Vancouver does a nice job of doubling. In season 1, we pulled stock from all over the world to be Starling City, and by the end of season 1, we discovered that the majority of the stock shots we'd used were from Boston. So at the beginning of season 2, we actually sent a film crew out to Boston to shoot new exteriors. So we have to say to pick one city. So yeah, it's actually fun for me to be sitting in post like, oh, that's my old law firm, that's my old apartment. But it really was something that organically came out of season 1 that we just sort of doubled down on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all these details.